The day I walked away from $100 million, my father called me insane. My mother cried. My brother Michael laughed and said I'd come crawling back within a month. They didn't understand that their fortune had become my prison and I was finally breaking free. I'm Alexandra Sterling, though these days I go by Alex Foster, my mother's maiden name. 5 years ago, I was the heir apparent to Sterling Enterprises, a Fortune 500 company that my grandfather built from nothing. Today, I'm watching that same company crumble while my own empire rises from its ashes. But let me start from the beginning. Growing up Sterling meant growing up in a gilded cage. Every decision was made for me. Every step of my life carefully choreographed to prepare me for eventually taking over the family business. Private schools, Ivy League education, carefully selected friends, even my hobbies had to be appropriate for someone of our standing, as my mother would say. I played along for years, excelling at everything they demanded of me. Harvard Business School, top of my class. Summer internships at all the right firms. Board meetings before I could legally drink. I was the perfect Sterling daughter, or so they thought. What they didn't know was that every night, after the corporate dinners and charity galas, I would sit in my room and work on business plans of my own. Ideas that could revolutionize the industry, approaches that could bring Sterling Enterprises into the modern age. But every time I tried to present these ideas to the board, to my family, I was shut down. That's not how we do things, my father would say, not even bothering to look at my proposals. Sterling Enterprises has thrived for 3 generations doing business our way. My brother Michael, 2 years younger and infinitely more willing to play by the old rules, would smirk from across the conference table. Leave the real business to those who understand it, sister dear. The breaking point came during a board meeting 3 days after my 28th birthday. I had spent months preparing a comprehensive digital transformation strategy. Sterling Enterprises was falling behind in technology, losing market share to more innovative competitors. My proposal would have modernized our operations, opened new revenue streams, and secured our future in the digital age. I still remember standing in that mahogany panel boardroom, watching my father flip through my carefully prepared presentation with barely concealed boredom. Absolutely not, he declared, closing the folder with a dismissive snap. We're not going to risk our reputation on these internet experiments. Sterling Enterprises deals in real assets, not virtual ones. But Dad, I protested, the market is changing. If we don't adapt. That's enough, Alexandra, he cut me off. This discussion is over. Michael, tell them about your plans for expanding our real estate holdings. As my brother launched into his presentation, the same tired strategies we'd been using for decades, something inside me snapped. I looked around the room at the aging board members, the dusty portraits of past CEOs, the heavy curtains blocking out the modern city beyond our windows, and I realized nothing would ever change here. That night, I made my decision. I drafted my resignation letter, not just from Sterling Enterprises, but from the entire life that had been planned for me. I would walk away from everything, my trust fund, my inheritance, my position in the company. I would start fresh, build something on my own terms. The next morning, I walked into my father's office before the markets opened. I quit, I said, placing a letter on his desk. He didn't even look up from his newspaper. Don't be dramatic, Alexandra. You can't quit your heritage. Watch me. That got his attention. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. You're serious? I am. I took off my family signet ring, the one I'd worn since my 18th birthday, and placed it beside the letter. I'm leaving, starting over, building something of my own. He laughed then, a sharp, dismissive sound that would echo in my mind for years to come. With what? You've never earned $1 without the Sterling name behind you. Then it's time I learned. My mother's reaction was exactly what I expected. Tears, pleas, guilt trips about family duty and tradition. Michael was more direct. You'll fail, he said, lounging in the doorway of my room as I packed. You'll burn through whatever savings you have and come crawling back with your tail between your legs. And when you do, I'll be running this company. I looked at my little brother, the golden child who had never questioned, never challenged, never dreamed beyond the walls of Sterling Enterprises. Maybe, I said, but at least I'll have tried. I left that night with 2 suitcases and the money I'd earned from my own private investments, a modest sum by Sterling standards, but enough to get started. I changed my name, rented a small apartment in Brooklyn, the kind of place that would give my mother heart palpitations, and begin building my dream. Foster Digital Solutions started in my living room. I took small contracts at first, helping businesses develop their digital presence. Many nights I worked until dawn, fueled by coffee and determination. Every successful project brought me clients. Every failure taught me lessons I could never have learned in the Sterling boardroom. My family, true to form, alternated between mocking my little internet business and trying to pressure me into returning to the fold. The annual Christmas card from my mother always included a note about how my office at Sterling Enterprises was still waiting for me. Michael sent quarterly reports showing the company's continued success, as if to prove I had made the wrong choice. I ignored them all, focusing instead on growing Foster Digital. I hired smart people who shared my vision, developed proprietary software that streamlined business operations, and built a company culture that valued innovation over tradition. By the end of the first year, Foster Digital had 50 employees and a growing reputation in the tech industry. By year 3, we were handling digital transformation for major corporations, our client list growing faster than we could hire people to manage the work. And then came the news I had been secretly waiting for. Sterling Enterprises was in trouble. Their refusal to adapt to changing markets, their reliance on outdated business models, it was all catching up with them. Their stock price was falling. Clients were jumping ship, and competitors were eating away at their market share. I watched from afar as my father stubbornly clung to his old ways, as Michael's real estate expansions turned into costly liabilities, as the company my grandfather built began to crumble. The same board members who had dismissed my warnings were now panicking as their fortunes dwindled. But I wasn't just watching, I was preparing. Foster Digital had grown beyond anyone's expectations, except perhaps mine. We were now worth 3 times what Sterling Enterprises' market cap had shrunk to, and I had maintained complete control of the company. No board members to appease, no family politics to navigate. When Sterling Enterprises' stock hit an all-time low, I made my move. Through a series of shell companies and quiet purchases, I began acquiring shares. The market was so focused on Sterling's decline that no one noticed the steady accumulation of stock by seemingly unrelated entities. No one, that is, except Michael. "Someone's buying us out," he burst into my father's office one morning, waving financial reports. "We're losing control of the company." My father, ever proud, dismissed his concerns. Impossible. No one would dare attempt a hostile takeover of Sterling Enterprises. But Michael was right. Day by day, share by share, I was taking control of the company that had once controlled me. The same board members who had laughed at my digital transformation proposal were about to learn just how wrong they had been. The Sterling Enterprises boardroom looked exactly as I remembered it. The same mahogany panels, the same heavy curtains, the same air of outdated grandeur. But this time, as I pushed open the double doors, I wasn't the obedient daughter seeking approval. I was the CEO of Foster Digital Solutions, owner of 51% of Sterling Enterprises shares. "What is she doing here?" Michael demanded, half rising from his chair. "Security." "Sit down, little brother," I said calmly, placing my briefcase on the table. "The security team reports to me now, as does everyone else in this building." My father's face had gone pale as he stared at the documents I'd spread across the table. Share purchase records, voting rights transfers, board member resignations, all the paperwork showing that Sterling Enterprises was now under my control. "Impossible," he whispered. "How?" "The same way grandfather built this company," I replied, "with vision, determination, and the willingness to adapt when the market demands it." I turned to address the shell-shocked board members. "Speaking of adaptation, I believe you all remember my digital transformation proposal from 5 years ago. The one you dismissed without even reading." Old Mr. Henderson, who had served on the board since my grandfather's time, cleared his throat. "Ms. Sterling, I mean Ms. Foster, perhaps we should discuss this privately. Everything I have to say can be said right here." I cut him off. "Sterling Enterprises is now a subsidiary of Foster Digital Solutions. There will be changes, significant ones." Michael slammed his fist on the table. "You can't do this. We're family." "Family?" I laughed. "Was it family when you mocked my dreams? When you dismissed my ideas? When you told me I'd come crawling back?" "That's different," my father interjected. "We were protecting you, protecting the Sterling legacy. And look where that legacy has led us. I gestured to the financial reports scattered across the table. Your stock is worth a quarter of what it was 5 years ago. You've lost major clients to more innovative competitors. The Sterling name means nothing in today's market. So this is revenge, Michael sneered. Destroying everything our family built? No, I said quietly. This is salvation. I'm going to do what I tried to do 5 years ago, bring this company into the modern age. The only difference is, this time you can't stop me. I nodded to my assistant, who began distributing tablets to each board member. What you're looking at is the first phase of Sterling Enterprises' digital transformation. We'll be implementing Foster Digital's proprietary software across all divisions, streamlining operations and opening new revenue streams. The board members scrolled through the presentations, their expressions shifting from shock to interest as they saw the potential. Even Michael, though he tried to hide it, was clearly impressed by the comprehensive strategy. The choice is simple. I continued. You can either adapt and be part of Sterling's future, or resist and be part of its past. Either way, changes are coming. My father stood up slowly, his face a mix of emotions I couldn't quite read. And what about us, your family? That depends on you, I replied. I'm offering you the chance I asked for 5 years ago, to modernize, to grow, to build something greater than what we inherited. The question is, are you finally ready to listen? The silence that followed was heavy with decades of family history, of expectations and disappointments, of battles fought across this very boardroom. Finally, Mr. Henderson spoke up. I vote in favor of Ms. Foster's proposal. One by one, other board members joined him. Even Michael, after a long moment of internal struggle, gave a grudging nod. Only my father remained standing, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. You planned this, he said slowly. All of it. Walking away, building your own company, waiting until we were vulnerable. I learned from the best, I replied. Isn't this exactly what grandfather would have done? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. He would have been proud, he admitted. Though perhaps not as proud as I am right now. The transformation of Sterling Enterprises began immediately. Foster Digital's teams moved in, modernizing systems, training employees, implementing changes that should have happened years ago. The market responded positively. Our stock price began to climb for the first time in years. Michael, to everyone's surprise, threw himself into learning the new systems. If you can't beat them, join them, he said with a wry smile when I found him taking coding classes in his free time. Though I still think you're crazy, just a different kind of crazy than I thought before. My mother took longer to come around. The day I moved back into my old office, now completely redesigned with modern technology, she appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands. I don't understand any of this, she admitted. The computers, the internet, the whole digital world. But I understand success when I see it, and you succeeded beyond anything we could have imagined for you. That's the point, Mom, I said gently. I had to imagine it for myself. The next year brought changes none of us could have predicted. Sterling Enterprises, now a division of Foster Digital Solutions, became a leader in digital innovation. Our stock price tripled. The same clients who had been jumping ship now returned, drawn by our cutting-edge solutions. My father, after much discussion, agreed to step down as CEO, taking an advisory role instead. The future belongs to your generation, he said during the transition announcement. It's time we acknowledge that. The old boardroom was converted into a digital collaboration space, its mahogany panels replaced with smart screens, its heavy curtains open to let in the light of the modern city beyond. Grandfather's portrait still hung on the wall, but now it was joined by images of the company's new achievements, its digital innovations, its transformed identity. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I found Michael waiting by my car. You know what the craziest part is? He said, falling into step beside me. You were right about everything, not just the business stuff, but about needing to break free and find your own path. I've spent the past 5 years just following the old playbook, never questioning, never innovating. Look where that got us. I studied my brother, seeing past the designer suit to the uncertainty beneath. It's never too late to start questioning, I told him, to start building something of your own. He nodded slowly. I'm thinking of heading up our new tech education initiative, teaching the next generation of Sterling employees about digital transformation. If that's okay with the boss? He grinned, reminding me of the little brother he used to be before family expectations and corporate politics came between us. I think that's perfect, I said. Just remember, question everything. Especially if someone tells you that's not how we do things. The next board meeting was held in our new collaborative space. As I looked around the table at the mix of old and new faces, veteran board members adapting to change, young innovators bringing fresh perspectives, family members learning to see beyond tradition, I thought about that night 5 years ago when I'd walked away from everything. I hadn't really abandoned my family's fortune, I realized. I'd simply found a different kind of wealth, the kind that comes from believing in yourself, from building something meaningful, from proving that sometimes the craziest choice is the wisest one. My father, now more mentor than adversary, caught my eye across the table and nodded slightly. He understood now what I had known all along, that true fortune isn't inherited, it's earned. Not just in dollars and cents, but in the courage to walk away from what's comfortable, the strength to build something new, and the wisdom to know that sometimes you have to lose everything to gain something greater. As I called the meeting to order, I glanced at the tablet in front of me. Foster Digital's stock had just hit another all-time high. Sterling Enterprises' digital transformation was being hailed as a case study in corporate evolution. And my family, after years of resistance, had finally learned the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the best way to honor a legacy is to reinvent it. Let's begin, I said, opening our latest innovation proposal. The future isn't waiting for us, we have to create it. And in that moment, sitting in the room where I had once been dismissed and doubted, I smiled at the irony of it all. I had walked away from $100 million fortune only to build something worth billions. But more importantly, I had built it my way, on my terms, proving that sometimes the crazy choice is the only sane option. The Sterling name still meant something in the business world, just not what it had meant before. And that perhaps was the greatest victory of all. The Anderson Medical Research Center's pristine halls had never felt so sterile as they did that Thursday morning, watching security escort me from the building. 3 years of groundbreaking research, countless sleepless nights, and a potential cure for an aggressive form of pancreatic cancer, all dismissed as wasteful and delusional. Dr. Chen, Dr. Victoria Reynolds called from her office doorway, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Your funding is gone, your lab is reassigned, and your theories, she smirked. Well, let's just say the board was very clear about the scientific validity of your work. I clutched my research notebook closer, feeling the weight of years of careful observations and breakthrough moments. They'd let me keep my personal notes, thinking all the important data was already in their system. They were wrong. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and until today, I was a leading cancer researcher at one of America's most prestigious medical institutions. But I committed the cardinal sin of medical research. I questioned the established treatment paradigm. At least look at the latest patient responses, I pleaded. The tumor regression patterns. Enough. Dr. Reynolds' voice sharpened. Your obsession with this alternative pathway is embarrassing. Real scientists follow established protocols, not wild hunches about cellular behavior. If she only knew what the early trial data really showed. Dr. Tom Zhang, my lead research assistant, caught me at the elevator. They're already clearing out the lab, he whispered, but I backed up everything. It's all safe on our private server. I nodded slightly, my hand touching the flash drive hidden in my lab coat pocket. Any word from the trial patients? All 17 are still showing remarkable improvement. Reynolds doesn't know about the last 5 we added to the study. Good. Those 5 patients would prove everything. The autumn rain felt appropriate as I walked to my car, my mind racing through the events that had led to this moment. The discovery had started with a simple observation, a pattern in how certain cancer cells responded to what should have been ineffective treatments, something that defied conventional oncology wisdom. But it wasn't just an anomaly. There was a clear pattern, a treatment pathway that no one had noticed before. One that, if properly understood, could revolutionize how we treat one of the deadliest forms of cancer. My phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Emily Wong at Stanford. Just saw the board's decision. Those idiots. But your last data set. Sarah, this is bigger than we thought. Emily had been quietly running parallel trials, validating my results without Anderson's knowledge. She'd seen the same impossible response patterns in her patients. The private server? I texted back. Secure and updating. Your latest patient data matches our results exactly. I smiled, thinking of Reynolds and the board, so certain they'd shut down a worthless project. They had no idea that the most important research was happening completely off their radar. The thing about cancer research is that it's not just about the science. It's about funding, reputations, and established protocols. Question those, and you become a threat to the entire system. I learned that lesson 2 months ago when I first presented my preliminary findings to the board. This is nonsense, Reynolds had declared, barely glancing at the data. You're suggesting that everything we know about pancreatic cancer treatment is wrong. Not wrong, I corrected. Just incomplete. These patients are responding to targeted therapy in ways that shouldn't be possible according to current models. Look at the remission rates. But they hadn't wanted to look. Traditional cancer treatments brought in millions in funding. My approach threatened that comfortable paradigm. What they didn't know was that I'd already started a small, unofficial trial. 22 terminal patients who'd exhausted all conventional options. Patients who, according to every accepted medical model, should have died months ago. Patients who were now showing unprecedented recovery rates. My apartment felt empty that evening as I set up my makeshift research station on the dining room table. My laptop connected to our secure server, displaying patient data that would make Reynolds and the board choke on their certainties. The recovery patterns were undeniable. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer patients showing 70% tumor reduction in just weeks. Blood markers returning to nearly normal levels. Survival rates that defied every statistical model. My phone rang. Dr. James Martinez from Memorial Sloan Kettering. Sarah, he said when I answered, I just reviewed your last trial data. This is revolutionary. How quickly can you get to New York? I'd met James at a conference last year, where he'd shown unusual interest in my unorthodox approach. They seized my official research, I told him. But not everything, I hope. The question was careful, measured. No, the important data is safe. Good, he paused, because I have something you need to see. Remember those anomalous results I mentioned in my lymphoma trials? My heart started racing. The same cellular response patterns. Exactly, and Sarah, 4 of my terminal patients are showing complete remission. It's not just pancreatic cancer. Your treatment pathway works across multiple cancer types. I sat down hard, my mind spinning. Independent confirmation from one of the world's top cancer centers. We need to meet, I said. But not here. They'll be watching. Already planned. There's a small oncology conference in Boston next week. Reynolds and her crowd won't attend. It's too focused on experimental approaches. But there's someone you need to meet. She's been seeing similar results in Tokyo. I glanced at my screen, where patient data showed the impossible terminal cancer patients recovering through a treatment protocol that, according to Reynolds and the board, was worthless. Send me the details. After hanging up, I dove back into the data. The pattern was becoming clearer with each analysis. Cancer cells weren't just randomly responding to the treatment. They were following a predictable pathway of regression. Understanding that pathway was the key to making the treatment work for even more patients. My phone buzzed again. A message from one of my trial patients. Dr. Chen, my latest scan. The tumors are almost gone. My doctor can't explain it. What you did, you gave me my life back. I thought of Reynolds and the board, so certain in their dismissal. They called my research wasteful, my theories delusional. They tried to bury discoveries that could save millions, all to protect their funding and reputations. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They thought stopping official trials would end the research. They didn't realize that 22 patients were already proving them wrong. That doctors like James Martinez were seeing the same patterns. That somewhere in Tokyo, more evidence was mounting. Tomorrow, I booked my flight to Boston. In 1 week, everything would change. But first, I had data to analyze. Because while Reynolds and her colleagues were writing me off as a failed researcher, patients were living who should have died. And their survival told a story that would shake the foundations of cancer treatment. The rain pounded against my windows as I worked through the night, each data point adding to a picture that was becoming impossible to dismiss. I thought of my mother, lost to pancreatic cancer 5 years ago because conventional treatments failed her. Sometimes, she told me near the end, The biggest breakthroughs come from the ideas everyone else rejects. She was right, and soon the world would understand why. Part 2. The Healing Truth. The Boston Medical Conference looked modest from the outside. A small hotel conference center far from the gleaming research hospitals where Reynolds and her colleagues preferred to present. But as I walked into the oncology symposium, I knew this was where real science was happening. Dr. Chen, Dr. Yuki Tanaka from Tokyo approached, extending her hand. Your cancer response patterns have changed everything we thought we knew about tumor regression. I studied her, brilliant eyes behind rimless glasses, the kind of researcher who cared more about saving lives than building reputations. This was the scientist James had mentioned, who'd been seeing the same remarkable results. Show her, James called from his laptop. Show her what happened with your terminal patients. For the next 3 hours, we compared data sets, my 22 patients, James' lymphoma trials, Yuki's research in Tokyo, 3 independent studies all showing the same impossible results. Terminal cancer patients recovering through a treatment protocol that violated every accepted model. The cellular response isn't random, Yuki explained, pulling up microscope imagery. Look at this sequence. The cancer cells follow predictable regression pathways when exposed to your treatment. Once you understand the pattern, you can trigger the response in almost any patient, I finished, across multiple cancer types. Exactly. James joined us. But it's more than that. The pathway you identified, it's not just a treatment response. It's a fundamental mechanism of cellular behavior that traditional oncology missed. My hands trembled as I pulled up my latest analysis. It's like we've been trying to stop cancer by fighting it, when we should have been redirecting it. The cells aren't just dying. They're transforming. Back into normal cells, Yuki smiled. Nature's own repair mechanism. The implications were staggering. Current cancer treatments often failed because they tried to kill cancer cells directly, triggering resistance, but we found a way to activate the body's natural cellular repair pathways to essentially reprogram cancer cells back into healthy tissue. My phone buzzed, a message from Tom. Reynolds is presenting at Harvard next week, claiming your research was fundamentally flawed. What do you want me to do? I smiled. Nothing. Let her talk. We have bigger plans. Over the next 3 days, we worked around the clock, combining our data sets and refining the treatment protocol. Other researchers joined us, an immunologist from Berlin, a cellular biologist from Tel Aviv, a genetics specialist from Montreal. Each brought their own pieces of the puzzle. It's not just one type of cancer, Dr. Heinrich from Berlin explained, showing his results. The regression patterns are consistent across multiple forms. Pancreatic, lymphoma, lung, they all respond to the pathway activation. The traditional treatments missed it, James added, because they were looking to destroy cells. Nobody thought to look for natural repair mechanisms. On the 3rd day, we presented our combined findings to the conference. The room was packed, not with pharmaceutical representatives or hospital administrators, but with practicing oncologists and research scientists, people who cared more about saving lives than protecting protocols. The data was undeniable. Hundreds of patients across multiple studies, all showing the same patterns. Cancer cells following predictable regression pathways, and most importantly, a treatment protocol that could activate these pathways consistently. My phone rang during a break, a number I didn't recognize. Dr. Chen, this is Dr. Marcus Collins from the National Cancer Institute. We need to talk about your research, immediately. The next week passed in a blur. Meetings with the NCI, emergency reviews of our data, fast-tracked approval for expanded trials. Then came the call that changed everything. Dr. Chen, the FDA commissioner's voice was grave. We've reviewed the combined data from all sites. This is unprecedented. We're preparing an emergency authorization for your protocol. How quickly can you scale up? I thought of my patients, of James's and Yuki's, of all the people who could be saved. We're ready. The news broke on a Thursday morning. Revolutionary cancer treatment shows unprecedented success rates. My phone exploded with messages. Colleagues, journalists, former patients, and then the one I've been waiting for, Dr. Reynolds. Sarah, her voice had lost its condescension. The board would like to discuss your return to Anderson. With full funding and... No thank you, I interrupted. I'm actually heading to a meeting at Memorial Sloan Kettering. They're establishing a new research center focused on cellular reprogramming. I'm leading it. The silence was profound. The next months were intense, training oncologists in the new protocol, setting up treatment centers, working with pharmaceutical companies to optimize drug delivery. But the results exceeded our wildest hopes. Terminal patients recovering, stage 4 cancers disappearing, success rates that made the medical establishment's heads spin. 1 year after my humiliating exit from Anderson, I stood on stage at the World Oncology Congress, presenting our results to thousands of doctors and researchers. Reynolds was in the audience. I could see her forced smile as the standing ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes. The paradigm shift in cancer treatment, the WHO director announced, begins today. But the real victory came in smaller moments. The young mother, given months to live, now cancer-free and watching her children grow. The elderly professor who'd resigned himself to death, back to teaching, and full of life. The child who'd faced a terminal diagnosis, now playing in the hospital garden. James runs the East Coast Treatment Center now. Yukai established an Asian research hub in Tokyo. Tom leads our data analysis team, ensuring that every new case adds to our understanding. Last week, I received a letter that made me cry. Dear Dr. Chen, 5 years ago, my wife died of pancreatic cancer because the treatments available couldn't save her. Yesterday, I watched my sister ring the remission bell at your clinic. You didn't just save her life, you gave our family hope we thought was lost forever. Thank you for not giving up when they tried to silence you. Robert Chang. I keep that letter in my office at the new research center. Next to it sits a frame containing my termination notice from Anderson, signed by Reynolds. Together, they remind me that breakthrough moments often look like failure to those too invested in old ways of thinking. The center itself is different from traditional research facilities. We encourage questioning, exploration, new perspectives. Every researcher is taught to look for patterns others miss, to challenge assumptions, to follow the evidence even when it leads to uncomfortable places. Reynolds retired last month. Her replacement at Anderson is implementing our protocol, though they call it by a different name there. It doesn't matter. What matters is that people are being saved. My mother's picture sits on my desk. Sometimes when I'm reviewing case files late at night, I imagine telling her about all this, about how her death led to discoveries that are saving thousands, about how sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from the ideas everyone else rejects. The cellular pathways we discovered are now standard tests in cancer screening. The treatment protocols we developed are taught in medical schools. What was once dismissed as wasteful research has become the foundation of a new era in cancer treatment. Last month, a young researcher came to me with an unusual pattern she'd noticed in treatment-resistant cases. The senior staff wanted to dismiss it as anomalous data. Look deeper, I told her. Sometimes the most important discoveries hide in the patterns everyone else ignores. She found something significant, a secondary regression pathway we'd missed. Her discovery is already helping us refine the treatment further. The old guard still resists sometimes. Change is hard, especially for those who built careers on previous paradigms. But the results speak for themselves. Every day, patients who would have died under traditional treatments are walking out of hospitals cancer-free. Yesterday, I spoke at a medical school graduation. A student asked what it felt like to be kicked out of my lab that rainy Thursday morning. It felt like failure, I admitted. But sometimes, what looks like failure is actually the first step toward breakthrough. The important thing is to keep following the evidence, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. The war against cancer isn't over. There are still forms we're struggling to treat, still mysteries to solve. But we changed the rules of engagement. We've learned to work with the body's natural healing processes to transform cancer cells rather than just trying to destroy them. And it all started with a wasteful theory and the courage to follow it wherever it led.